Hey there, Mama. You're listening to the Lift the Shame podcast. I'm your host, Crystal, mama of 5 and your family's intuitive eating dietitian, here to help you cut through the diet culture clutter so you can enjoy freedom with food as a family. I'm on a mission to help you end the generational legacy of diet culture in your home so you can experience motherhood free from food guilt and body shame. Listen in weekly for guidance on how you can ditch diet culture, heal your relationship with food and your body, and confidently raise intuitive eaters. Let's dive in and lift the shame together. Hey Mama, welcome back to the show. As always, I appreciate you being here and tuning in, and I'm excited to dive into a new topic with you today. So I don't know about you, but here we are at the end of our school year and my kids are officially home on summer break, which is awesome. And that can come with a whole other stressor, as I have realized in conversations with different parents and families and just seeing the general noise that's on social media these days, that with our kids being home, sometimes that comes with different challenges. And there is some inherent structure that school or daycare, whatever it is that your child may be in, provides. It provides reliability and just kind of a knowing of what's coming throughout the day. And so I thought today I would just talk about this as it relates to food, because I know for a lot of parents, sometimes having kids home for summer break equals more requests or more wanting for food or seeking out food, or it may seem like your kids are grazing more or asking for snacks more often. And that can be stressful for a lot of parents. And I know too, with just the higher cost of food these days and inflation, food is not cheap, and it can be hard to navigate all of our kids' requests and the more frequent requests that they may have around food when we're feeling that added stress of the financial stretch that comes with feeding our kids and feeding our families. So I wanted to speak to this a little bit today and just give you some tips and suggestions and things to look out for if you are also having your kids home for summer break, whatever that might look like, and navigating just a different schedule or different routine around food, or wondering, how do I navigate the higher volume of requests that you might be getting for snacks, or, that kiddo that just seems to always be rummaging in the pantry but never wants to actually sit down and eat dinner. What do you do, or what can you do? And I think this is really a great opportunity to explore an area in feeding kids where we can release some of that shame, some of that generational shame that we have felt growing up as kids ourselves, or that we're trying to break away from when it comes to feeding our own children. Because ultimately, it's easy to shut down those requests in effort to make them go away, or an effort to try to steer our kids in a certain direction when it comes to how they're eating or managing their appetites. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we want our kids to know and believe that their appetites, no matter how they change, are safe, and that they are okay in their bodies. And wanting food or seeking out food, we never want our kids to walk away from food requests feeling bad about themselves, or feeling like something's wrong with my body, or my appetite is wrong, or my body is a problem now that needs to be fixed. And whatever age child that you might be raising at this stage, we inevitably come up with those food requests, and it's a great opportunity to learn how to manage them and navigate them so that we can preserve our child's belief in that their body is safe and that they are okay no matter how their appetite is changing. And so I want to talk about this as it pertains to kids being home on summer break. And you might be wondering, why is it that my child might seem to not eat very much or be fine with kind of a portioned amount of food that's being packed and sent with them to school, but when it comes to them being home, it might feel like a completely different ballgame. And I totally get that. And I see that with my own kids too, where, I send them to school with only so much of food in their lunch boxes. And oftentimes a lot of that comes back home uneaten. And all of a sudden, now that they're home, there's a lot more requests for food, or they're needing to eat much more frequently than they might have eaten at school. And so you might be seeing that too and wondering what's going on. And sometimes that can spark some stress within us as parents, where we feel like, man, there's something wrong with my kid. Like, they're eating so much more. They're wanting to eat so much more. What's going on here? How can I minimize this, or how can I make this go away? And I just want to normalize that for various reasons. It's very normal for our kids' appetites to change when their routine and their schedule is changing, which is what's happening when they're no longer in school. They don't have that, again, predictable structure that school provides, and they're home where things might be a lot more loose in terms of activities or expectations, or they're getting up later, or maybe they're going to bed later, or just the normal things that they're used to doing during the school year aren't there. And so I just want to normalize again that if your child's schedule is dramatically changing because school's out for summer, it's expected to see changes and fluctuations in their appetite when they're home as well. And other things too, when kids are at school, and I see this especially with my kiddos, I have a couple ADHDers, and when they are at school, sometimes school can be a big point of distraction, especially at lunchtime, where they really are eager to play with their friends and they have such a limited window of time to eat. And so it's really common for kids to maybe choose to play or do other activities versus actually eat the food that they have. And so sometimes the distractions that they have at school kind of distract them from their own hunger and fullness cues, where they're maybe not as attuned to what they're feeling in their body because they're so distracted by other activities that they're wanting to engage in. And this can be especially true if you're raising a neurodivergent child, where that may easily happen. And so oftentimes when kids are home and a lot of those good distractions are removed, they're now more likely to be attuned to what's going on in their body, plus the access of having food directly in their line of sight or in their environment while being at home may be kind of that recipe for increased requests for food or just a higher appetite in general. Other things is that kids tend to be more active generally during the summer, or there might be different activities or things that they're doing. They might be swimming more or playing with friends. Those things as well can contribute to a changing appetite for our children. So I want to again normalize that, because sometimes we expect our kids to maintain a certain way of eating, or we think, wow, they were okay with this amount of food before. Why is that changing? And that can be triggering sometimes, or again, spark that distress within us where we feel like this is a problem now, or this is something that I need to manage or fix. It's expected for our children's appetites to change, especially during the summer months. There's also this element of boredom. Kids might be more bored at home with less routine, less activities or things going on in their day-to-day life while they're on summer break. And so that sometimes can contribute to increased appetite needs as well, where maybe it's this idea of not having a lot to do or feeling like, what can I fill my time in? And food sometimes fits that bill. Now, this is not to say that eating for boredom is wrong, and there's nothing inherently wrong for eating for emotional reasons. And I do want to make sure we touch on that as well. We want to normalize that too, that sometimes that is something that our kids gravitate towards when there's not other things that they're used to having filling their time and their energy. So another reason why this conversation just came up in my mind as something that I know is top of mind for many of you as you have kiddos who are home for summer break and transitioning to a summer schedule. I saw this on social media as well, where I did come across a meme that seemed to go viral, and it was a picture of a refrigerator and the handle to the refrigerator door was missing. And there was a sign that was taped on the refrigerator that said, "Summer break don't mean eat all day. Kitchen is closed. Use your school stomach." And I just thought it was interesting. There was a lot of comments that I was kind of reading through, and I know it's meant to be a joke. It's meant to make light of what we feel sometimes as parents when we're home and our kids are home and they just seem to want to eat all day, and that can feel really stressful. And I get that it's meant to be a joke. And at the same time, I think it also plays into this common narrative that we hear that's definitely promoted by diet culture, where it's telling us, like, if your kids are wanting to eat more, or if they have a higher appetite, or if they're asking for food, that's a bad thing. Hunger is a bad thing. That should be something that's controlled. And we run the risk of projecting this message of shame to our kids when they're asking for food or searching for food or wanting food, and we're trying to micromanage it versus leaning into it and responding to it in a way that honors their hunger and doesn't project any shame towards them. Because again, the way that we approach it can make a huge difference in how they feel about food or their bodies. And oftentimes this is how a lot of us grew up internalizing messages or beliefs that our body was was wrong or our appetite was wrong based on the way that caregivers responded to us when we were seeking food or asking for food or showing interest in eating certain foods. This can play a big role in shaping the narrative and how our kids feel about food and their bodies. And so this is why I wanted to just talk about this today, as many of you are transitioning to having your kiddos home for summer break, and just shedding light on this default approach that we can tend to have when our kids show a high interest in food, because there is that dogma and that diet culture narrative that eating for pleasure or eating for enjoyment or eating for emotional reasons or having a higher appetite is wrong. Our approach, whether we are conscious of it or not, can sometimes be one that errs on restriction, or that kind of comes from a place of micromanaging or frustration. Like we feel like we have to get our kids to eat a certain amount or get them to be okay with not eating as frequently. We feel like it's something that we have to now control. And I want you to think about a different possibility. I do think it's important that we develop different approaches to this so that we can release any feelings of shame around appetite or the need for food. And taking a different approach doesn't mean that we're becoming permissive in our approach to parenting. That's a whole nother conversation. But I think sometimes when we think about this idea of giving our kids permission and allowing them to eat what they need and not injecting or infusing any shameful messages around their increased appetite needs, it can conjure up this message of, or this idea of just letting them eat whatever they want, just giving them a free pass on the pantry and the fridge all day long. And that's definitely not what I'm saying either. I think there's a happy medium here. And this is why I'd like to just share some tips here that can help you navigate this in a way that really does allow you to break the cycle of maybe things that you've done in the past or things that you were used to growing up yourself. There is a different way. And so I wanted to dive in and just share some tips with you here. And if you don't know yet from listening to previous podcast episodes, my love of alliterations, I love to give you things that are easy to remember. And so today I'm giving you 3 tips that start with the letter A. So we're talking about 3 A's today in order to help you approach summer snacking or increase summer needs of having your kids home from school. How can you approach this? So tip number 1 here is attitude. So I think it's really important to start with understanding what is your default approach. What might your reactions or default reactions be when you notice that your child is rummaging through the pantry soon after you've had breakfast, or they're looking for a certain snack that they want, or they're asking for snacks, or they're asking for food? What might be coming up for you, and how is that affecting the way that you're engaging with or responding to your children? Having awareness around this is really important because it allows us to understand where we're at and helps us know where we can potentially pivot to support our kids in a more positive way around food. So again, I just want to normalize that it can be really stressful and triggering when our kids are constantly asking for food all day. And I just want you to consider what is coming up for you. How are you responding? What are maybe some of the nonverbal messages that you're sending to your child? Again, sometimes I think when we're thinking about our approach to food, we think only about the things that we're saying and the phrases that we're saying, but we also want to think about our mannerisms, our behaviors. What are those things communicating to our kids about food or about their bodies or about how we feel about their requests? And if you find yourself dealing with a lot of distress around this, or feeling anxious or feeling angry or feeling frustrated, that's okay. I think it's important to just start with what we're feeling and name those things so that we can have awareness of how we want to potentially change that or pivot that. So I think another part of this too is feeling frustrated in our kids asking for things that maybe we're not offering, like packaged snack foods. I know are a big one that comes up during summer, where our kids are like always wanting those packaged snacks and the crinkly packages, things that they can stick their hands into and kind of munch and eat while they're doing other things. And sometimes that can bring up a lot for parents, especially if these snack requests are happening between eating times or soon after you've just fed your child and maybe they didn't want to eat something, but now they're asking for a certain snack in the pantry. So just being aware, what is coming up for you in those moments and how are you responding to your kids? And can you potentially work on shifting your attitude around those things so that you can alleviate any shame that may be coming up and being projected onto your child because of their request? And this can change as we begin to normalize our child's appetite, our child's want and desire for processed foods and convenience foods, and reminding ourselves that those things are not wrong. There's nothing inherently wrong with our kids desiring certain foods. And it really also helps us further investigate what our approach to those foods might be too. So sometimes we kind of have this idea of out of sight, out of mind, or if I don't keep these foods in the house, then my kids won't want them. But then if your child goes to like a birthday party or some kind of social event where those preferred foods are available, that can help us identify what foods our children may be gravitating towards or needing more exposure to. And part of this shift in our attitude comes in our approach to the foods that our kids are showing a high interest in. And this is where I see some of the conflict coming up for parents or parents feeling distressed around their child's food requests is this gap between what we think our kids should be eating versus what they're actually gravitating towards or the things that they may actually be wanting or liking. And there's a lot of angst around convenience foods and processed foods. And I have had many conversations about this on the podcast, so I'll link some episodes in the show notes for you if you're interested in learning more about this. But part of changing our attitude around our child's food requests is also shifting our approach to convenience foods or the foods that our children enjoy or again are showing a high interest in eating. It's really important to legalize those foods and make them part of our home, make them part of your child's eating environment, and allow them to be able to eat those things without any shame or judgment attached to them. And I'm going to, in another tip here, talk to you about how you can do that. But before we can even go down that road, we have to first examine what's our attitude towards those foods. Are we upset or distressed that our child is showing a high interest in those things? Are we trying to hide them? Are we trying to keep them out of our home? Are we trying to mitigate our child's interest in eating those things? If so, that may be fueling your child's food-seeking behaviors or your child's higher interest in those foods. Anything that feels out of reach is only going to incite our child's desire for them even more. So it's really important, again, to examine what is your attitude overall in this situation. How do you feel about your child's increased appetite? What is that bringing up for you? How do you feel about some of the foods that your child is seeking out or desiring or wanting? And are there some attitude adjustments that need to happen in order to support moving and pivoting an approach to food that helps our kids develop a narrative around food that's centered on trust and safety and connection? Those are huge things that are going to support an overall healthy relationship with food and their bodies. And that really stems and starts with ourselves and how we feel about our kids eating and how we feel about their appetites and the foods that they're choosing and their food preferences. Remember that our children are very attuned to our emotional state and they are feeling and sensing what we're feeling. And if we're feeling anxious or we're feeling frustrated or we're feeling angry because of their food requests or the things that they're showing an interest in, this is going to play a role and shape how they feel about those things too. And again, we want to work towards an approach towards food that releases any shame or generational cycles of shame or guilt around food or their bodies. And it really starts with our attitude and how we feel about those things. So pivoting our attitude towards one that normalizes our child's appetite and increased food needs, especially when schedules and routines are changing, is going to be really important. So tip number 2 is anticipating hunger. So that's the second A, anticipation. Again, we want to anticipate that our kids are likely going to have higher food needs during the summer break or when they're not in their normal routine, especially with the structure that school provides. So often we approach feeding from a reactive place where we are reacting to our children and they're the ones that are constantly having to ask for food or for specific types of foods. And then we're in a reactive position to that. And the problem with that is that it doesn't allow us to have leadership around food, which really alleviates our child's anxiety or pressure or need for having to seek out food themselves. When we can step up to the plate and take some responsibility for that, it really allows them more freedom to learn how to listen to their bodies and flex and develop their intuitive eating abilities. But when they are constantly worried about not getting access to the food that they need or not getting access to preferred foods, that can actually make it more challenging for them to listen and engage in their body's intuitive eating abilities. And so we want to move from a place of reaction to responding. And this is a more proactive place where we are actually anticipating our child's needs, we're anticipating their hunger, and we're anticipating preferences in terms of foods that they're showing an interest in, and we're taking a proactive approach and staying one step ahead of them. I know this can be really hard, and it also can be really freeing for our kids when that kind of responsibility is taken off of their plate. So what might this look like? Well, I'll tell you for us, for my kids, I have 5 kids and they have varying appetite needs, of course, but I just anticipate that during the summer with them being home and us not having as much structure in terms of activities during the course of the day, there often is a higher need for food. And the reason I can tell that is because oftentimes they'll be searching out for food before I offer. So that can be some things to look for. Like if your child is rummaging in the pantry and it's been a couple hours since you've last fed them, that can be a sign that they are needing an eating opportunity. Or if they're starting to ask for food, or if they're asking what's for lunch or what's for snack, or you're getting a lot of those food requests, those are signs that your child is needing probably an eating opportunity or may have needed it already, like half an hour ago. And one general guideline, again, this is just a guideline, not meant to become like a rigid rule by any means, but I find that kids need an eating opportunity almost every couple of hours, at least for us during the summer. And I've seen this especially with families I work with too, where sometimes kids just need that more frequent opportunity where it's not like they're eating all day long, but it's bumping up what you might normally provide them in order to anticipate those increased hunger needs. It's not to say that your child will necessarily eat at those given eating opportunities that you're providing. Again, it's up to our kids to decide whether or not they want to eat and what they want to eat from the foods that you're providing. But just us being able to take that initiative and offer that food before they're having to ask for it can be so powerful for our children. And it really allows us to, again, move into a leadership role with food that is more proactive, it's anticipating, and it's normalizing. When our kids constantly don't have to be the ones to ask for food, when we are anticipating and we're offering before they have to ask, that sends a really powerful message that their hunger needs are okay. And not only are they okay, you are okay with them and you want them to make sure that they have enough access and reliable access to the foods and the quantity of food that they need over the course of their day. And you might be thinking, wow, every couple of hours just sounds like I'm basically feeding my kid all day. And yes, basically, yeah, it feels like that's your job, right? Just feeding them all day. But I also want to just add a caveat here that it doesn't have to look like a full production every time you're feeding your kiddo. You know, sometimes we'll have popsicles for some of our eating routines, or ice cream, or bowls of cereal, or, easy things that you have on hand, and just integrating those things and offering them again, saying, all right, let's eat, let's take a break, let's have a snack time. Or it could be, watermelon on your back porch, or I don't know, just easy things. It doesn't have to be this big production. And in fact, I have a free resource for you if you're feeling like I'm totally out of snack ideas. I don't even know what to feed my kid. I want you to snag my free snack guide. I will link it in the show notes for you. It has a variety of different ideas just to give you some brainstorming and things to work with, because I know it can feel like we're in a snack rut when we're figuring out how to feed our kids, especially how to feed them more frequently. But generally, I have found that offering our kids an eating opportunity about every couple of hours, definitely not more than 3 hours, I feel like is a kind of a sweet spot, especially during summer months when our kids are needing to eat more frequently. And I have found this to work for the wide variety of ages that I have with my own kids. So my kids age from ranges 5 to 13. And I have found with my younger ones and my teenager that having frequent opportunities for eating is beneficial for all of them. And it really, I think it helps too, for us as parents, when we also are taking the time to pause what we're doing, to take some time to check in with our bodies, drink water, eat food. It's so easy to do those things for our kids. And we also should be part of that too, where we're allowing ourselves to check in and take the time to take care of our bodies in terms of feeding ourselves regularly over the course of the day, because it's easy to forget to do that. And I think by modeling that and taking the time to do that, we are communicating a very important message to our kids that this is something that's important for you too. And again, it doesn't have to look a certain way. It doesn't have to become this big production where you're cooking something new every time you're feeding your kids, but rather just taking the initiative to anticipate their hunger by offering food and making it available. And this is something that you can also utilize if your child is, let's say, rummaging in the pantry. If it's between an eating time, you can always defer to the eating time that's coming up, or you can use that as an opportunity to just feed them in that moment, because often food seeking can be related to your child needing to eat or feeling hungry, or maybe they didn't eat enough prior. So you can use that as an opportunity to initiate feeding them. So sometimes I'll notice my younger one in the pantry and I'll realize that it's been a couple hours since we've eaten. And so that sometimes prompts the reminder, like, oh, I need to take this initiative here. And I'll just say it like, oh, honey, I see you found the graham crackers in the pantry. Why don't we sit down and let's have a snack? And using that as a segue, or again, as an opportunity to take the initiative to normalize our child's appetite, to normalize any foods that they're showing an interest in eating or that they're perhaps seeking out, and making it available and accessible to them. So this kind of pivots into my third tip here, which is access. So this is the third A. So often when our children are showing that higher interest or higher need or higher want for food, we sometimes respond to that by limiting the access, because it can feel scary, because we've been taught and we've been inundated with these messages that hunger is a bad thing and hunger is something to control. And sometimes we are subconsciously projecting that fear onto our kids when we're trying to limit or control what they're eating or how much they're eating. And what ends up happening if kids are feeling restricted or limited or not feeling like they're able to eat what they need to meet their appetites, that often triggers a preoccupation with food. So it can actually make food-seeking behaviors even worse when our kids don't feel like they have the permission that they need to eat what their bodies are wanting. And so I'm a huge fan of permission and access within flexible structure. Again, giving our kids permission to eat is not the same as becoming permissive as a parent and just saying, do whatever you want, eat whatever you want. We still want to take that leadership with food. We still want to provide frequent opportunities, as we discussed in the previous tip. But within that context, we want to provide the foods that they're showing an interest in and provide access to them and allow them to eat what they need. I always say that permission prevents preoccupation. So this is an important place where we want to plug in the foods that they're showing a high interest in. So if your child is showing a high interest in goldfish crackers, let's say, we want to give permission to those foods by plugging them in to the eating opportunities that we're having over the course of the day. Because when our kids feel like, I have permission to this food that I'm really interested in, it prevents that from becoming a food that now is escalated on a pedestal in their mind and something that they become preoccupied with having. So this is why it's really important to take notice of the foods that our kids are showing a high interest in and incorporating them alongside other foods that our kids are also still learning how to eat. So again, I want to encourage you to check out my free snack guide that I will link for you in the show notes. I talk more about this, as well as give you a framework in how you can plug in the foods that your child is showing a high interest in alongside other foods that they may be learning how to eat. And the goal is to offer those things without pressuring your child to eat something over something else. So for example, I've seen this a lot on social media from big feeding kids accounts where they'll say, make sure that your child gets a protein at every snack. And we don't just want them to eat the goldfish crackers because they're going to be hungry or they're going to be hangry and they're not going to feel satisfied. And there is some nuggets in there that I think are helpful in terms of offering our kids a variety of different things. However, we don't want that to become a rigid rule in our mind of how our kids should be eating. Because again, the only person that should be deciding what they want to be eating from the foods that you're providing is your child. You want to be respectful of their autonomy and honor and trust them to eat what they need from the things that you're offering. So yeah, you can offer, the goldfish crackers with some cheese and some cut up apple, but we don't want our kids to feel pressured to eat those things. Like your child might just still eat the goldfish crackers, and that's okay. This is where that permission piece also comes in. It's not just giving our kids access to the things that they're showing a high interest in, but it's also trusting them and allowing them to see that we trust them, even if they're not eating in a manner that we think they should be eating. This is where I see a lot of strife come up between parents and kids, which can really trigger those mealtime battles where it's like, I think my kids should be eating this, or I think they should be taking a bite of the protein in order for them to feel satisfied. But ultimately, that is not in our lane of control. That is robbing our kids of their autonomy and potentially communicating the message that we don't trust them to eat and that we have to be the ones to micromanage them. And that is going to snowball into a potentially harmful narrative for them where they now feel like they can't trust their bodies, right? So we don't want them to dissociate from their intuitive eating abilities. We want them to feel like, here's what I'm providing and I trust you to eat what you need. And within the context of the foods that we're providing, we want to, again, proactively offer the foods that our children are showing a high interest in eating and allowing our kids to eat what they need, no matter how starkly different it looks from what we think they should be eating. What we think they should be eating often interferes with our kids being able to eat in a manner that is conducive for their body's needs. So just keep that in mind. And I want to give you a bonus tip here as we kind of wrap up this episode for today. And my bonus tip for you is just to rethink what it means to feed your kids, especially over summer break when schedules are more loose and you may be traveling and you're just not in the normal routine that you're used to having. We put so much pressure on ourselves for feeding our kids to look in a certain way. Like we should be sitting down at the table, we should be eating certain foods, they should be eating this, they should be eating that, I should always have a vegetable or a fruit. We put so much pressure on ourselves as parents and we create these arbitrary food rules, often that stem from diet culture narrative. And I just want to give you permission to let go of all those things so that you can really focus on connection and joy with your kids as you're eating and as you're feeding them more frequently over summer break. Because it's those rules that actually rob us of the positive aspects of eating and feeding and enjoying our kids. And I want you to enjoy your kids as you're eating because feeding is such a big component of parenting. And it's so easy when feeding becomes stressful, it really makes parenting feel stressful, right? Like it doesn't happen in a vacuum. And I want this to be the summer for you where you feel like I can enjoy my kids without these food rules or these, I should do this, I should do that hanging over your head. Like give yourself permission to let that go and make feeding your family whatever that needs to look like. And oftentimes that comes with needing to lower our expectations and let yourself have ice cream for dinner. Yes, I said that. And we do that as a family multiple times, especially over the summer where it's those longer days and it's too hot to cook. And setting up a little ice cream sundae bar can be an amazing way to have an eating time together as a family. Or ordering pizza and eating on the back porch or whatever that looks like. I want you to feel like you have freedom and flexibility to enjoy eating with your kids and to let them be part of that enjoyment. And I know that that starts with giving yourself grace and permission to let go of any arbitrary rules that you're holding on to. So I hope this helps encourage you. I know that summer can be hard and challenging for many different ways. And I just want you to, again, reclaim the joy that should be part of eating together. And just remember, it doesn't have to look a certain way. You don't have to enjoy every single moment, but to not let diet culture steal anything from the time that you have with your kids and your family this summer. So just a friendly reminder, again, you can snag that free snack guide. It will give you different ideas in terms of easy snacks to put together that are kid approved and adult approved too. And as well as just give you some tips in terms of a framework, like how can you plug in your kiddos' favorite foods alongside other things that they're learning how to eat and how you can set that up for them over the course of the day. So I hope that helps you. We are going to be starting a series on navigating feeding kids in eating disorder recovery. And we have many different great conversations coming down the line. So I hope you'll come back next week. As always, thank you for being here, and I will see you soon. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Lift the Shame podcast. For more tips and guidance on your motherhood journey, come connect with me on Instagram at Crystal Cargis. Until next week, Mama, I'll be cheering you on. Bye for now.